Chapter 1. Shadows of the Past. Once upon a time, in a gloomy little town shrouded in mystery, there stood a quaint old bookshop. Its creaky wooden sign swayed gently in the chilly wind, announcing, "Victor's Book Emporium." To any curious passerby, the narrow cobblestone streets, dimly lit by flickering gas lamps, cast eerie shadows on the damp walls of the surrounding buildings, adding to the town's enigmatic charm. In this peculiar town lived Victor, the middle-aged owner of the bookshop. He was known for his extensive collection of rare and unusual books, which attracted scholars and bibliophiles from far and wide. However, as of late, the townspeople couldn't help but notice a change in Victor's demeanor. Once a kind and gentle soul, he had become increasingly irritable and withdrawn. Rumors swirled around the town about the cause of his transformation, but no one knew the real reason behind it. One foggy evening, as Victor was closing up the bookshop, his old friend Thomas stopped by to check on him.
"Victor, my friend,"
Thomas said with a concerned frown.
"I've noticed you've been acting rather strange lately. Is everything all right?"
Victor sighed, avoiding eye contact.
I appreciate your concern, Thomas, but I'm fine. I just have a lot on my mind, that's all.
Thomas hesitated, sensing there was more to the story.
"You know, Victor, back in the day, you used to be the kindest person I knew. You'd always lend a helping hand to anyone in need, and you were especially fond of animals. Remember Midnight, your beloved black cat? Whatever happened to him?"
At the mention of Midnight, Victor's eyes grew wide, and his hands trembled ever so slightly.
That's a painful memory, Thomas.
He whispered, swallowing hard.
Let's not talk about it.
As Victor turned away, a gust of wind blew through the street, carrying a soft, ghostly meow that seemed to echo in the night. Both men shuddered, but neither of them could pinpoint where the sound had come from. Unbeknownst to them, the shadows of the past were about to come alive, setting the stage for a chilling tale of guilt, redemption, and the haunting power of a cat's vengeful spirit. And so, the story of the phantom feline began. Chapter 2. The Phantom Feline. The days that followed were filled with an unshakable sense of unease. Victor couldn't help but feel as if he were being watched, and every shadow seemed to hide an unseen presence. One stormy afternoon, as he was returning from a visit to the market, Victor stumbled upon a small, shivering black cat huddled in an alleyway. The sight of the cat sent a chill down his spine, for it bore a striking resemblance to Midnight, his long-lost pet. As Victor approached the cat, it gazed at him with piercing yellow eyes, never blinking, never looking away. Victor felt a pang of guilt in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. He hesitated for a moment before deciding to bring the cat back to his bookshop, providing it with shelter from the storm. Little did he know that he had just invited the phantom feline into his life. From that day on, the black cat never left Victor's side. It followed him around the bookshop, always lurking in the corners of his vision. Victor found himself growing more and more unnerved by its presence, unable to shake the feeling that the cat knew his darkest secrets. Each day, the phantom feline seemed to grow bolder, its ghostly meows echoing through the empty halls of the bookshop, taunting Victor with memories of his past. As Victor's encounters with the cat became increasingly distressing, the townspeople took notice of his erratic behavior. Whispers began to spread, and some started to question Victor's sanity. In the local tavern, Thomas and his friend, Martha, discussed their concerns.
"Have you seen Victor lately, Thomas?"
Martha asked, her voice tinged with worry.
"He's been acting so strange, always muttering to himself and looking over his shoulder. And what's with that black cat that's always with him?"
Thomas shook his head, his brow furrowed.
"I don't know, Martha. It's like he's being hunted by something, or someone. That cat. It's almost as if it's a ghost, sent to torment him."
As the townspeople whispered and speculated, Victor's desperation grew. He knew he had to rid himself of the ghostly cat, but how? With each passing day, The phantom feline tightened its grip on Victor's conscience, pulling him deeper into the shadows of his own guilt. And in those shadows, the whispers in the dark grew louder, revealing the true extent of Victor's past actions and the reasons behind his cruelty. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Dark. As Victor's torment continued, the townspeople grew increasingly concerned. One evening, a small group of them gathered in the dimly lit corner of the local tavern, determined to uncover the truth behind Victor's odd behavior. Among them were Thomas, Martha, and an elderly woman named Edna, who had known Victor since he was a child.
Victor used to be such a kind and gentle soul.
Edna began, her voice quivering with emotion.
He'd always help anyone in need, and he had a special love for animals. I remember when he adopted Midnight, his old black cat, and how much he cared for her. But something changed in him after she passed away. It's as if his heart turned cold.
Thomas chimed in, recalling a rumor he had heard.
I heard that Victor did something terrible to another animal after Midnight died. Some say it was out of grief, others believe it was an act of cruelty. Whatever it was, it seems to have haunted him ever since.
The others nodded solemnly, understanding that Victor's recent actions were a result of the guilt that weighed heavily on his conscience. As they continued to discuss his strange behavior, Victor himself was pacing the floor of his bookshop, wringing his hands and muttering under his breath.
I can't take it anymore.
He whispered to himself, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape from the ghostly cat.
This phantom feline is driving me mad. I must find a way to be rid of it once and for all.
Victor's desperation was mounting, and he knew he needed to confide in someone. Late one night, he sought out Edna, the only person in town who still seemed to care for him. Trembling, he spilled his darkest secrets, revealing the cruelty he had committed and the guilt that had consumed him ever since. Edna listened with a mixture of sadness and shock.
Victor, my dear boy,
She said softly.
You must confront your past and accept the consequences of your actions. Only then can you find redemption and be free from this haunting.
With Edna's wise words echoing in his mind, Victor made a decision. It was time to face the phantom feline and confront the specter of his past. He knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger and heartache, but he could no longer hide from the whispers in the dark. Chapter 4. Confronting the specter. Victor's heart pounded in his chest as he prepared himself to confront the ghostly cat. With a newfound determination, he set out into the night, following the shadowy figure that seemed to be taunting him from the corner of his eye. As he walked through the dark, narrow streets of the gloomy town, the wind howled around him, heightening his sense of unease.
Show yourself.
Victor shouted into the darkness, trying to mask the fear in his voice.
I am ready to face you and my past.
The black cat appeared before him, its eyes glinting like embers in the night. It beckoned him with a flick of its tail, leading him on a harrowing journey through the town. Victor followed the cat through a series of increasingly eerie and unsettling locations: an abandoned house with creaking floorboards, a graveyard shrouded in fog, and a derelict church where the wind whistled through the broken windows, creating an otherworldly melody. At each stop, the cat forced Victor to confront his guilt, presenting him with vivid reminders of his past actions. Victor saw a vision of himself hurting the animal that had triggered his descent into darkness, and he felt the weight of his guilt bearing down on him like a suffocating blanket. As they reached the final stop on their journey, the very spot where Victor had buried Midnight, the ghostly cat stopped and stared at him, its eyes burning into his soul. Victor could no longer hold back the tears.
I'm so sorry.
He sobbed, falling to his knees.
I know what I did was wrong, and I can't change the past. But I beg you, please, forgive me. Let me make amends.
The cat studied him for a moment, as if assessing the sincerity of his words. Then, with a flick of its tail, it vanished into the darkness. Victor felt a great weight lifted from his shoulders, and he knew that he had been granted a chance at redemption. As he walked back through the town, The eerie atmosphere seemed to dissipate, as if the specter of his guilt had been exorcised. Victor was filled with hope, determined to face the consequences of his actions and make amends for his past cruelty. Chapter 5. The Road to Redemption. Victor woke up the next morning, feeling lighter and more determined than ever to make amends for his past cruelty. He started by cleaning up his bookshop, sweeping away the dust and cobwebs that had accumulated during his descent into darkness. As he worked, he could feel the energy in the shop shifting, becoming warmer and more inviting. Victor then reached out to the townspeople, making a conscious effort to reconnect with them. He offered to help repair the broken fence at Mrs. Brown's house and volunteered at the local soup kitchen, serving meals to those in need. At first, the townspeople were wary of his sudden change, but as they saw Victor's genuine efforts, they slowly started to accept him again. One day, as Victor was organizing books in his shop, a young girl named Emily timidly approached him. She had heard from her friends that the once cruel bookshop owner was turning over a new leaf and had decided to see for herself.
Excuse me, Mr. Victor?
Emily asked hesitantly.
I was wondering if you had any books about cats. My family just adopted a kitten, and I'd like to learn how to take care of her.
Victor smiled warmly and led Emily to a shelf filled with books on animals. As they browsed the titles together, he found himself sharing stories of his beloved Midnight with the young girl, his heart swelling with a renewed sense of purpose. In the weeks that followed, Victor continued to work on rebuilding his relationships with the townspeople and making amends for his past actions. He started a book club at his shop, creating a space where people could come together, share their love of reading, and learn from one another. His once dreary bookshop became a lively hub of community activity, as people of all ages gathered to exchange ideas and stories. As Victor stood in the doorway of his bustling shop one day, he realized that he had found inner peace and a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life. The ghostly cat had been a catalyst for change, forcing him to confront his guilt and seek redemption. Now, free from the torment of his past, Victor was ready to embrace the future and continue on the road to redemption. The townspeople, witnessing Victor's transformation, were reminded of the power of forgiveness and the importance of compassion. Slowly, the gloomy atmosphere that had once shrouded the town began to lift, replaced by a sense of hope and renewal. Victor's journey to redemption had not only transformed his life but also inspired those around him to believe in the power of change and the possibility of a brighter future. Epilogue: A New Dawn. Months had passed since Victor's redemption, and the once gloomy town had transformed into a place full of warmth and hope. Victor's bookshop continued to be a bustling hub of activity, where townspeople gathered to share their love of reading and form lasting friendships. One sunny afternoon, Emily, the young girl who had helped Victor on his journey, was sitting in the bookshop with her friends discussing their latest book club pick.
Victor's story is amazing, isn't it?
Emily said to her friends.
Who would have thought that a ghostly cat could bring about such a change in him and the whole town?
Her friend, Jacob, nodded.
It just goes to show, everyone deserves a second chance, and sometimes all it takes is one person to believe in you.
As the children continued their discussion, Victor watched them from behind the counter, his heart filled with gratitude. He knew that his transformation had not only changed his life but also had a lasting impact on the town and its inhabitants. The spirit of kindness and forgiveness had spread throughout the community, inspiring others to confront their own guilt and seek redemption. One day, as Victor was watering the flowers outside his shop, Mrs. Brown, the elderly neighbor he had helped earlier, approached him.
Victor,
She said with a gentle smile.
I just wanted to thank you for all you've done for our town. You've brought us together, and your bookshop has become a place where we can learn, grow, and find solace.
Victor smiled back at her, touched by her words.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. It was the support of people like you who helped me find my way. We've all played a part in making this town a better place.
As the sun set on the town, casting a warm glow on the streets and buildings, Victor stood in the doorway of his bookshop, reflecting on his journey. He knew that he could never undo the mistakes of his past, but he had found redemption and purpose in his new life. And as the townspeople continued to heal and grow, they too were reminded of the power of hope, the importance of forgiveness, and the possibility of a brighter future. Together, they had created a new dawn for themselves and the generations to come.